Well, hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to tonight's MCHSA seminar, or the Maternal and Child Health Student Association at UAB. We're excited to have a great seminar tonight, and to give him as much time as possible, I'm going to kick it to our MCHSA president, Danielle Jordan, and she's going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Danielle?
So our speaker tonight is Matt Buttler. He is a senior case manager for ALIRP, the Alabama Interfaith Refugee Partnership here in Alabama. Matt joined ALIRP in June 2023 as the half-time case manager and started his current full-time role in January 2024. He has a Bachelor's of Arts in Spanish from Auburn University and has done graduate study work in Spanish literature at the University of North Carolina, as well as social work at Arizona State University. During his 10 years in nonprofit social services, Matt has worked with Latino and migrant communities in Central Alabama, Central Arizona, and along both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. He has worked in faith-based and secular nonprofits of various sizes and focus areas, and his previous roles include direct service, resource development, and political advocacy. Matt has special training in mental health case management, supporting survivors of domestic, partner, and sexual violence, and community organizing. Matt believes that all people should have access to safety and basic necessities, as well as dignity and self-determination. He draws from his diverse experiences to support people seeking relief here in the United States. So without further ado, I will kick it to our speaker for tonight. Thank you for speaking for us.
Yes, thank you, Danielle. That was a wonderful introduction. And you also reviewed a lot of information that I had on a slide that I won't have to review now. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, seriously, thank you for having me. Those of you who are watching live, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are watching in a recording, hello, and thank you for joining us. We have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm going to get started. But the title of the presentation tonight is A Practice Perspective, Case Studies and Considerations for Supporting Refugee and Asylum-Seeking Mothers and Children. Brief overview of what I'll be presenting tonight. First, I'll do a very brief personal introduction. I'll then provide a little bit of a background and introduction to ALIRP, the organization I work for, and sort of the model that we use to support asylum seekers and refugees. I will define a few key terms related to the subject, then move on to providing specific context for refugees and asylum seekers, based on some broader data and also based on my personal experiences with case management in the communities. We do have 2 case studies that I'm going to go over of some wonderful partners that we have that are in various stages of the maternal and child health process. So we'll go over those and then kind of sum it up with some special considerations for working with these populations and community members. And then we have time at the end for Q&A. So personal introduction, that's pretty much what's in my bio there. The only things I think that Danielle didn't mention were the specific organizations I've worked for. I worked for HICA, the Hispanic Interest Coalition of Alabama, which actually is now called HICA, the Hispanic and Immigrant Center of Alabama. They recently changed their acronym. They've been around for about 25 years now here in Central Alabama. I worked for Big Brothers Big Sisters in Phoenix, Arizona, and I also worked for Chicanos por la Causa, which is similar to HICA in Arizona, but much bigger and actually has expanded into several other states now. Introduction a little bit to ALIRP. This is just our basic mission statement. We're a diverse coalition of community members. And don't worry, I'm not going to read out all the text of all the slides, but this one I think gets a pass. Interfaith religious leaders and laypersons, as well as representatives of other community groups who have come together for the purpose of supporting refugees and asylum seekers through direct assistance, education, and advocacy. So just a little bit about ALIRP. We were started in 2016 as an interest group in response to the Syrian refugee crisis going on at the time. In 2019, we became a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have a very awesome and active board of directors. I've seen that at least 2 of them, I think, are attending tonight. So, hey, guys. We have a volunteer-driven service model, which I'll go over a little bit in a minute. And you can kind of look at the numbers here from 2020, when we started really counting how many families we were supporting. That was 7 families, moving up to 18 families and 18 families, meaning 53 individuals in those families. In 2021, in the end of 2021, March 2023, we were at 28 and 102. And this month, we are at 42 families and 160 individuals. So both the organization and the community here has been experiencing some rapid growth, as you can see. So our model of providing direct support, which is the main wing of the organization that I work in, first of all, we refer to our clients or the people receiving our services as partners. We are the Alabama Interfaith Refugee Partnership, so that's where that comes from. We try to really focus on the relationship and social connections between people receiving the services and people providing services, so we call them partners. So our staff and volunteers work with our partners to assess kind of where they are, what's going on, but also what positive things do they have in their life, what resources are there, what strengths, what strategies might they have that they've already had to use before in their life, because you have to remember, and this topic will come up again, but just to get here to Central America as a refugee or as an asylum seeker is quite difficult, and people go through a lot of stuff just to get here. And so we want to recognize those as actually strengths, in addition to being some risk factors for PTSD and some other conditions. So we work with the partners to form a strategy for them to adapt to life in the US, specifically in Central Alabama, and move toward independence and self-sufficiency. So those are some two big goals that we have for all of our partners. Some specific areas of need and thus some areas of support that we provide is access to healthcare and legal services. So we don't have healthcare providers or legal providers on staff, but we do try to facilitate access to those services as much as we possibly can. Advocacy, that can take many forms. It can be sort of a broader advocacy at different levels of government or different institutions. It could also be more of an individual advocacy situation where somebody might need someone to write a letter on their behalf to a landlord who's not following regulations that they should be following, or an employer might need some sort of letter to be sent from an organization in order to pay the person. Those are not the greatest examples, but that's basically what I'm talking about with access to services. I'm sorry, with advocacy. We also do provide some cultural orientation services, education-related services, financial stability, food and clothing resources, information and referral, which we actually provide that to people even if they don't really meet our criteria. If they first reach out to us and they don't meet our criteria, but there's some information and referral that we can do for them, then we do that as much as we can. And then transportation is a huge area of support. So basically the two aspects of our direct support model are the case management system, which goes through the process all the way from when we first hear about a person or hear from a person. That's the inquiry and referral stage. We move them forward if they meet the criteria to intake and assessment. If they clear that process, we move on with onboarding, maintenance, and then eventually case closure if all the needs have been met, which really doesn't happen. But if people seem to be self-sufficient, they don't necessarily need our services or want our services. That's what happens sort of at the end of the case management process. And the senior case manager receives support from their board of directors. And we do have a direct support committee with 2 co-chairs, and those 2 people assist me a lot in a lot of the policies and procedures. The other aspect is the care team model. So those are volunteers who form relationships with partner families while providing services. So they will be providing services like transportation to appointments, accompaniment to appointments, tutoring, help with registering kids for school, all kinds of things. And the care team members receive support from the care team coordinators as well as a senior case manager if they have any needs that I can help them with. So our goals basically are to provide holistic internal services and also provide what I would call ethical external referrals, which is not really a technical term, but basically I try to be as ethical as possible when referring people to other organizations. Want to make sure that I'm not referring people to a place where they might not feel safe, they may not be treated with respect, and anything like that. Of course, we are limited in that capacity, but we do as much as we can. Another thing we do is increase the cultural orientation of individuals and families. And one of the big goals is to decrease acculturative stress, which is the stress produced by trying to assimilate and adapt to a new environment, a new society. So we're going to move on to defining a couple of key terms within the field of migration. First one is migrant, which is sort of the biggest umbrella term, which basically is not an official term, but it means someone who moves away from their usual place of residence, whether inside or outside of the country, temporary or permanently, for a variety of reasons. So that's sort of the most general term that we have. A refugee is basically someone who is seeking refuge who is outside of the country that they are from, who is not able or willing to return to the country because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. So that's sort of a complicated definition, but basically the asylum seeker meets the same definition, but the difference is that if you're an asylum seeker, that means that you are presenting yourself at the border of the US, or you're already in the US, and you're requesting asylum from there. So you're not from your home country or another third country requesting asylum in the US. You do it here in the US. Internally displaced person means a person who has not crossed a border to find safety. And then the quote says they are on the run at home from the UN. A couple of other terms: unaccompanied alien child. Unaccompanied minor is the more common term. Is basically a minor who doesn't have a parent or legal guardian in the US who is able to provide care and physical custody to them. So in fiscal year 2023, we had 1,600 unaccompanied minors settled in Alabama, and 247 of those were in Jefferson County. Unauthorized immigrant is a preferred term over undocumented, illegal, etc. Basically, it just means an individual in the United States without authorization to be there. Moving on to refugees. So refugees first register and are approved, some are approved, by the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Many people wait more than 10 years before resettlement. That's why you see people spending a lot of time. One reason why you see a lot of people spending time in refugee camps. And overall, less than 1% are resettled. So all refugees go through extensive vetting, which is part of that process, part of the reason that so few are actually resettled. So if you meet somebody who's a refugee here, they're certainly in the top 1% of all refugees, and they're probably in a smaller percentage for being resettled here. So the process of refugee resettlement on the federal scale is that the president consult with Congress to determine the number of refugees that we are going to admit every year. So the goal is 125,000 for fiscal year 2024. If you look up the data, the numbers around 2016 were a whole lot lower than that. So it does vary based on the federal process between the US president and Congress. So after that is done, the State Department works with 8 organizations and their local affiliates to provide resettlement services to refugees. The local affiliate that we have here in Birmingham is called Inspiritus, which is technically under the Lutheran Immigrant and Refugee Services, I believe. So we do work a lot with them. Moving from refugees to asylum seekers. So there are 2 kinds of asylum, basically. Affirmative asylum is basically you're allowed to be in the country legally, and you must apply for asylum within 1 year of entering the US. That's the majority of people that I work with are in that situation. I do have a couple of people who are in the defensive asylum situation, which basically if affirmative asylum is denied, or if the individual is given a removal notice, meaning like pending deportation, basically, they must become part of the immigration court system. And we'll talk a little bit about the court system in a second. Asylum seekers, unlike refugees, don't receive any financial or social support or social service support from the US government. Refugees do receive some support, at least at the beginning. Work permits. So for asylum seekers, they have to wait 5 months after filing the application for asylum, even to apply for a work permit. So basically that means even if you got in the country and the next day you found an immigration attorney who was going to take your case, you did a consultation determining he was going to take the asylum case, you paid at least the deposit for that asylum case, which is usually a couple $1,000s. If you did all that as soon as you got here, you would still have to wait 5 months in order to even apply for a work permit. Once you apply for the work permit, you still have to wait for it to process and arrive, which can take several months. So basically, even if you did everything as fast as you possibly could, you could be waiting for a work permit for 9 months. So you're legally allowed to be here in the country for 9 months, but you're not legally allowed to work here for those 9 months. And you're responsible for legal fees, but you're not allowed to work to save money for those legal fees. And the legal costs can be up to $10,000 for an asylum case, family of 4. That's a very general number. I'm sure the more specific numbers are out there. So a little bit about the court challenges. Number 1 is the backlogs. We currently have a backlog of about 2.6 million cases and an average wait time for a court hearing of 762 days. Those court hearings can vary wildly, though. I've seen a lot less than that, and I've actually seen a little bit more than that recently. Court dates that were scheduled farther out than that is. The other issue is denial rates. So some immigration judges basically will approve most of the cases that they get, and then there are other judges who deny almost all of the cases that they get. So one of the judges in the Atlanta court has an extremely low approval rate. I think it's like 2%, something like that. So they vary wildly based on the state that you're in and the judge that you get. So just very quickly review the fact that there are several federal departments involved, and there are more than this. But the main ones are the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, which includes Customs and Border Patrol, ICE, and USCIS, which is the more administrative body for immigration. If you're looking at the Department of Health and Human Services, that's what houses the Office of Refugee Resettlement and Department of Justice. The Department of Justice houses the Executive Office for Immigration Review, which is the immigration court, one of the immigration courts that people end up in. So please remember, with all this legal stuff, I'm not an attorney. This is just the information I have based on my experience and what we have, the resources we have here at ALRP. So some of the health risks for migrants. Obviously, increased risks for things like sexual violence, human trafficking, labor exploitation, all kinds of different exploitation. Increased risk of family violence and child abuse, just statistically. There's also a lack of support and protection from family and social networks, which increases people's vulnerability. They don't have their protective family and social supports around them when they leave. The health effects of migration are also multifaceted, and they can include the cause, the setting, and the phase of migration, before, during, and after the migration process. All of that can be traumatic for people. So that's our next slide. Trauma is the word of the day, the word of the whole sector that we work in, basically. So prior to migrating, 80% of people are fleeing violence, and 60% have witnessed death or serious injury. I definitely have seen that in the clients the partners that I work with. During migration, obviously there are lots of dangerous conditions. People can be attacked, they can be robbed, they can be sexually assaulted, kidnapped, trafficked. A lot of things can happen to people when they're on the journey here. And then even after migration, when they arrive, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear of deportation, that they're going to have to return to the place they just had to leave, chaotic and unstable living conditions, poverty, lots of things associated with that, and broadly a lack of social support networks, although we do see people form those networks fairly quickly in a lot of cases. All right, thank you everyone for bearing with me. Number 1 case study here is Juana, and I will go ahead and clarify that this person's name is not Juana, and some of the specific details in the case studies have been slightly altered just to not be too specific about anyone's birth date or anything like that. We want to protect the confidentiality of our partners as much as possible. So, case study number 1, Juana is 21 years old. Her country of origin is Guatemala. She identifies as Catholic. She's a Spanish speaker, English learner. She's been going to some of the classes that we refer people to for English as a second language. Her status is that she is an asylum seeker. So she's currently in the process of trying to figure out if she has a strong asylum case. And then if so, she'll be moving forward with that. Her current relationship status is that she has a domestic partner who has recently rejoined the family. He was still in Guatemala for the last 7 months or so, and about a month ago, he arrived here in the US. So now she does have a domestic partner here. Her household status is that she lives with her partner, her mother, and her 2 siblings, and now her 2 children as well, in a 2-bedroom apartment. Health insurance status is that she had emergency only Medicaid until birth, and now she has full Medicaid coverage. Time in the country, she's been here for about 8 months. She did have one previous child previous to this birth that we're talking about here, and that child is 2 years old now. She gave birth in December of 2023, and her care team members, there were 3 care team members, and all 3 were Spanish speaking. So she had a good bit of support. So this case study is a person who has already given birth, because that allows us to kind of look at what went well, what challenges are still there, what could we have done differently. So some of the successes is that we had a meeting with this partner. I think it was about 3 months before the due date. And so we sat down, we looked at calendars, we looked at locations of hospitals, and we kind of outlined the options and kind of what needed to be planned out for labor and delivery. And that plan was established and followed very well. I think it went very well. I didn't have to be responsible for much of that. There was 3 care team members, like I said, that really did a great job. So far, there have not been any negative health outcomes for the mother or the child. And we can see that she's gaining self-confidence and wanting to be more independent. She definitely has expressed that she wants to, now that her domestic partner is here, father of her children, she wants to be independent and move out on her own with her family. So it's a good step. When I first met her about 8 months ago, she was very timid. She really was only speaking, she was 20 years old, but she was really only speaking through her mom. She was very reluctant to contact me directly or ask for things directly. And that's gotten much, much better recently. So I think that's a positive for sure. Some of the challenges that we're having with her, she's having trouble being consistent in her postnatal appointments. Today she missed her second appointment in a row, and didn't really give a reason. So basically I just have to address that and make sure we get her back on track. One of the reasons that she has issues getting to appointments is transportation. So we try to find volunteers who can provide transportation for her as much as possible. She also has a car seat, but sometimes it's in other people's cars, and so I would show up sometimes, she wouldn't have the car seats. So that has been just a very specific challenge there. Household changes and financial needs, with the household change of the domestic partner coming into the household of already a full apartment of people, there's been some tension between the adults in the family. And there's also financial needs now that there is another person. And also now that there is another baby. So that kind of ties in with childcare needs. They don't really have any ability to pay for childcare, and pretty much all the adults, the other adults in the family, even extended family, are working during the day. So it's very hard for Juana, if she has an appointment that she wants to go to by herself, like a counseling appointment, or if she wants to go to the English class by herself, she doesn't really have the ability to do that very well at the moment. So those are some of the successes and challenges that we've had in this case. The second case study is a person named Basma. She's 23 years old. She has not given birth yet. She is from the Darfur region of Sudan. She identifies as Muslim. She speaks Arabic and is learning English. She's doing very well with her English classes, actually. Her immigration status is very interesting. She's a visa holder, and she got that visa through a lottery program, which is not a very common way to get here, but it is a way to get here. And that has actually produced some issues because it's such an unusual thing for some service providers that they came in through a lottery and a visa, that's caused some other challenges as well. Her marital status is that she is married. She lives with her husband, and they do not have any kids yet. She's had Medicaid. She's had full Medicaid, basically since right after she got here. Due to her different status, she was able to get full Medicaid before the birth. She's been in the US about 6 months. Again, no previous children. Her due date is in June 2024. And another big difference, sorry about that, is that she only has one care team member currently, and that person does not speak Arabic. So communication is a challenge. So some of the successes and strengths so far with her pregnancy is that we started the appointments early, which was great. She did have like some early health issues that got taken care of, but it was good that we got the process started. She's definitely leaning into learning English and starting to be more communicative, kind of similar to Juana. She really has only communicated through her husband. Her husband's English is very good. He actually has a degree in English. So she kind of lets him handle that. But every once in a while now, she'll say something in Arabic and ask her husband to translate for me, kind of talking to me directly, which I think is a good sign. And the family is financially stable. They have a lot of resources. They have some social connections, actually. They're connected to some churches, some other families from similar areas, and they have some friends from Sudan who live right next door to them, which I think is a big plus for them. Some of the challenges and needs with this case, language access being by far the biggest challenge and need. I don't speak Arabic, and we don't have very many people who speak Arabic who are connected to the organization. We have some, but there's just a whole lot of need for language assistance. So basically any time that we have to interact with an institution like food assistance or a medical billing company has come up recently, there's a whole lot of back and forth translation that has to happen in order for the patient to give permission for the person to talk to me about the billing or whatever the issue is. And it just ends up, I spent an hour on the phone with the medical billing company a couple weeks ago, and all I needed to know was the hospital that the bill was from, because it didn't say that. So anyway, that's an example. It would be really nice if we could get a volunteer or a few volunteers with a similar background, or someone willing to really work with someone who doesn't have very many common language skills, but who is willing to learn and really, I think, wants to connect with people. As I mentioned, she needed some services early on in the pregnancy, and that happened to be before the emergency Medicaid coverage. I'm sorry, the full medical coverage. Full Medicaid coverage was begun. So we had to go back and try to get Medicaid to cover some of those expenses, which has been a big challenge for them because they don't have the money to pay off the bills right away. And also they don't really have the familiarity with the medical system because they're getting different bills from different companies and different hospitals. And so that's been a challenge with the medical bills. Also, I've had a little bit of difficulty with them qualifying for services. They have visas and social security numbers, but they don't have work permits or official entry documents. They have stamped passports, but they don't have any entry documents like most of our partners. And most of it's related, I think, to the fact that they came in through the visa lottery system. After those two case studies, we can identify some considerations for prenatal and postnatal care. For prenatal care, start appointments as soon as possible. Try to get them on a calendar. If it needs to be a paper calendar, that's fine. If it needs to be a calendar on someone's phone, that's also fine. But there's going to be a lot of appointments, and especially if they are refugees or asylum seekers, they may have to coordinate transportation ahead of time. So it's definitely a good thing to have those organized and scheduled. Confirm and apply for healthcare coverage as early as possible. Start conversations early about pregnancy, especially for first-time moms, pregnancy, labor, delivery, postnatal care. Maybe especially if you have someone who's from a similar background, that person might be able to identify some things that might be different about the labor and delivery process here than it might be in their home country. So those kind of things would be the issues, the concerns that we would address when we're having those early conversations. So also creating a labor or birth plan, which is a very common thing in general, but making it more specific to the population, making sure that transportation is available, reliable transportation, what they know, making sure that people know what to do if it becomes an emergency and they need emergency services. Obviously call 911, but sort of explain that process a little bit, demystify it. I think people feel a little more comfortable knowing that. Knowing the hospital information and importantly, who to contact in that situation. So obviously, I make it very clear that I'm not an emergency service professional, and the volunteers that we have are not emergency service professionals. If there's an emergency, you need to call emergency services. However, people to call when labor or delivery starts that it could be care team members, it could be family members, it could be friends, basically just support people for those emergency contacts. And also make sure to bring ID, insurance card, any other kind of documentation that might be needed to all medical visits. And also I would add to this for prenatal care, try to see if there's any sort of assistance even at the specific medical clinic that you go to, because sometimes specific clinics have programs for assistance for low-income people or people who don't have insurance or people who are immigrants, refugees and asylum seekers. So it's always worth it to ask. As far as postnatal care, kind of the same thing as prenatal care, start those appointments as soon as possible, try to be as consistent as possible, even though it may be hard balancing things with the new baby around. Provide follow-up in case of missed appointments, is which I'm doing one of my partners at the moment. Make sure that they have essential supplies, big things like crib, carrier, car seat. Those things can be done, taken care of ahead of time. And also try to make a plan for continuing expenses. That's a very difficult thing to plan for: food, formula, diapers, wipes. But there are resources out there for those things so that people don't have to use all of their income for that. And along those lines, making a plan for financial stability, considering any additional expenses. So school or clothing. Again, there are resources out there for free or discounted resources, but any kind of financial stability planning that people can do is a really good thing. So here are some special considerations for working with these populations, working with mothers and children specifically. So I've organized them into don'ts and do's. First one is don't make assumptions about individuals based on stereotypes or generalizations. And I don't mean to be, I don't want to suggest that anyone would do any of these don'ts, but this just seemed like a good way to organize it. So what we do want to do is treat each person as an individual, and social work uses the pie model, person in environment. So we treat each person as an individual with an individual environment and experience. So there may be commonalities with other individuals, but we do want to treat everyone individually. Also, don't overcommit or overpromise. Do establish and maintain clear boundaries and manage expectations. This is a huge one because people don't necessarily know when they first come to you as a provider. They don't necessarily know what are your work hours, what's your availability, kind of what's your role. So, I would caution against, giving out cell phone numbers if you don't intend to answer it after hours. Over-promising things as far as we can get you this resource by this date, or we can help you with this financial aspect when we don't really have all the information to be able to make that promise confidently. So don't overcommit or overpromise. Don't do all the talking. Obviously, literally, you're not going to do all the talking, but really, as much as you can, do try to ask questions, listen actively to responses, and respect the different styles of communication that people had. This is an issue I've run into, really needing to be patient with some people. The way they communicate is something like circumlocution, which basically just means going around something before getting to the point. So talking in sort of a longer narrative, a longer story about the background, and this was happening, and then finally getting to the point eventually. So that is a communication style that kind of varies through different groups. Don't ask unnecessary questions related to traumatic history. Obviously, there are some questions that we have to ask, but do try to practice trauma-informed care whenever possible, because we don't want people to be re-traumatized by what we're doing to try to support them. Don't focus solely on people's needs and limitations, the negatives, the gaps. Do emphasize strengths, resources, resiliency, while also addressing the needs and the barriers. Don't make decisions for people, which obviously that doesn't happen very often, but don't even try to pressure them into specific options. And I put a star there because obviously we want people to have the most information possible. And if we have an informed opinion about something, we can give that opinion if it's acceptable in our profession. However, if there's something where there are several options, all the options are safe, all the options are going to get the person what they need, it's okay and encouraged to let the person make their own decision in that case. So yeah, providing with the most information possible so people can make their own choices. Don't promote ethnocentrism or paternalism. Like, obviously, people are not going to do this on purpose, but kind of keep yourself in check. Like, am I treating this person as if my cultural norms or my ethnicity is more important than this other person's in some way? Am I putting some sort of a power dynamic in there? Because it's easy to happen when you're providing services to people. So obviously not going to do it intentionally, but kind of keep that in check. The attitude that we know best for everyone without really knowing people first. So do promote self-determination, informed consent, boundaries, and confidentiality. And those are standard ethical principles of social work, which I think are very relevant to this kind of work. Here's the big one right here. I wish I didn't have to put it at the bottom, but don't burn yourself out or your staff or volunteers by overworking and undercaring for yourself. Practice self-care, and it doesn't necessarily just mean in superficial ways. There's a lot of things you can do for your work-life balance. That's pretty much an individual thing, but if anybody wants any tips and tricks, I have had to institute a lot of burnout prevention measures in my life over the years, so happy to share those techniques. So these are the don'ts and do's of working with this population, and I have arrived at the Q&A section of the presentation. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type those in the chat. Give everybody a minute. They can be questions about refugees and asylum seekers, about the work that we do. If you want me to go into any more detail about the case studies.
Hi, Matt. I have a question. This is Meredith Garten. Thanks for the presentation. So I, just in disclosure, know Matt. I work with him with ALIRP. And I was just curious, in thinking through some of the legal stuff that you spoke about and some of the case examples that you gave, I imagine that some people are giving birth to children who are born here in the United States, and so then would have citizenship. Are those families then available to access WIC, for example? And do you find that from sort of a case management perspective, does that introduce like both positive and maybe some negative items of equity within the house?
Very good question. Thank you. So the answer to the first question of does having a U.S. citizen child give you access to WIC? The answer is yes, it should. Sometimes the rules are not applied equally everywhere in Alabama. Sometimes people don't actually know their own rules, unfortunately, but that is the case. And the second thing, that's a pretty safe assumption, that it's a pretty accurate assumption that it can be both a positive and a negative. There's the idea of public charge, which there were some rules that came out a couple of years ago, and then also they've been talking about it recently. Basically, what that means is the government wants to keep track of any immigrant receiving any sort of benefit from the government, even if it has to do with the child. So the rules are not super clear on that, and people are sort of afraid to access those kind of benefits, even though they may qualify, and that may not affect them negatively at all. So yes, having mixed status households is definitely interesting. It's very hard to keep track of who qualifies for what. But yes, that's a very good question. Thank you.
This is Brian Gillan. I just want to have some clarification. Both cases I felt they both belong to family that are on ground here in the US. So in each of the cases, like those individuals are being treated as single cases, or each family member is a case, because I think they're all refugees that are reunited here. So is it like treated as a family, like the whole family treated as a case, or each individual in that is treated as a case? I'm just asking that question in the case of kind of optimizing support, or kind of synergizing efforts, or maybe support to each, so that we don't have to put too much into one person, thinking that the person will take care of the rest, while the other person also is attending the same service. Just a question for clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. My answer is that we're basically moving from one model to the other. So we've been keeping track of our partners as family units. And there can even be multiple family units in one household, which makes it really confusing. Multiple different families, maybe related or not, in the same household. What we're transitioning to now, which goes along with we're instituting a new case management software program. So basically we'll have a database, and we're going to start basically treating partners more as individuals within the family, within the household, but treating individuals specifically, because sometimes often they do have specific needs. You know, one of the kids may have a need related to education. One of the parents may have a need related to healthcare. And there may need to be some ongoing case management with different issues for people. So yeah, my answer is we've been looking more at sort of the family and focusing on that. And I think now we're kind of fleshing it out, and we're looking at people's individual needs as well. Great question. And then I got a message here on the chat. And the question is, in what ways do you think our organization or UAB could be a partner when addressing maternal and child health? That is an excellent question. I'm very glad you asked that. So we do have a whole lot of opportunities this just says thank you, but I just wanted to put the website up here. So we do have a lot of opportunities to volunteer with and interact with ALIRP. What we do with different groups, we have like an organizational sponsorship program where an organization can get together and basically be a sponsor of ALIRP families for $500 a year. There are also opportunities to be on care teams and do other kind of volunteering. There's another UAB student group actually who is going to be collecting. They're doing a drive for like hygiene and first aid and healthcare items. So that's like a possibility. Also, you can kind of do a drive if you want to collect material things. We have, we do a lot of promoting on social media. Obviously we could always use support on that. We do have some events throughout the year. So as far as an organizational connection, I'd love to continue the conversation. I'd love to set up a meeting and kind of think what I could throw some ideas out there. I've got a pretty good idea of what people need at the moment as far as our partners. So yeah, we can definitely talk more about that. Specifically with addressing maternal and child health, though, some of the stuff I was talking about, the labor delivery it would be really nice to be able to collect some resources, even like printed materials in the language that the partner speaks, so that they have just some kind of educational materials, making sure that they have the plan that's also in the language that they speak. So we could use support. We just found out that another partner is pregnant this week. So we definitely have people who are in that situation and in that population. So really it could be anything. We could use the help. We would love people's perspective. I really like ALRP in that it involves people from lots of different fields. A lot of people from public health, people from social work, nursing, private businesses, attorneys, that kind of thing. Just a good mix of people involved. So yes, that's a great question, and I would love to talk some more about that. Meredith wonders if the MCH group could become a care team that's initiated once we find out someone is pregnant. As from my perspective, I think that's a wonderful idea. We would make the people volunteers of ALRP and they could serve on a care team. That's certainly something we could do. Yeah, that's a great idea. A specialized care team. Yes, a specialized care team.
And I wondered if
That's
you
great,
guys
honestly.
do you guys have regular events or fundraising events that you could use volunteers for? Like always we have a spring XYZ or a fall, something or other.
Yeah, we do have events. Let's see, we had a volunteer appreciation event in the summer, and we had a fall fundraising event in November. So nothing coming up in the next couple of months, but I will certainly keep you all informed. Because yeah, we will be having some events.
I think we also have on the call our education and advocacy leads from ALIRP. And one of the things that we're working towards is having some book club events that are in the fall and in the spring. We've been kind of doing one per year. But that could be fun to maybe, collaborate and think about a special maternal child health kind of book club event or something to just highlight this as a specific topic of interest. So yeah, I think there's lots of points of collaboration. I just would love to hear you say why you do the work that you do.
All right, I think I can do that. I do the work that I do for many reasons, but I think a lot of it has to do with my background, sort of the path that I've taken. I started as like pre-med in college, switched my major over to Spanish. I was volunteering every summer as an intern along the border in Mexico. I think what pointed me this direction was the relationships with people I met in Mexico. That was what sort of formed my professional alignment there. And I think what got me from there to here in LRP has basically just been trying out different sizes of organizations, different focus areas, working in different roles. And again, it's still about, at the core, it's still about the relationships. I mean, that's why I do it, is because I can see visibly right in front of my eyes the positive effects that positive, healthy social relationships have on pretty much everyone, even people who are some of the most vulnerable people on the planet, some of the most traumatized people on the planet, can still, benefit from that, and they can still make progress. They can make moves. So that's why I do it. If we don't have any other questions, everyone, please feel free to visit our website, alirp.org. You can probably find a way to get to me from there. You can just email the info address, and that'll get to me as well. And also I can be corresponding with Julie. But yeah, no, just to end it up, thank you, Meredith, info@alirp.org. I just want to thank everyone. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, the Student Association. Thanks for your time. Thanks for having me. This has been a great experience for me to talk through this specific issue. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being with us tonight, Matt. And if any of you are students at UAB but are not members of the MCHSA and you'd like to learn more, just go to our Engage page and you'll be able to learn all you want. That's also where we include our archives of our recorded seminars, past seminars. When the archive for tonight's seminar is ready, it'll be emailed out to all the registrants, and then it'll be archived on our Engage page. There's also a way on that page that you can join the organization free of charge. And I hope y'all have a great rest of your evening.